listening to the Here Be Dragons podcast.
And we are live. All right, welcome to the Here Be Dragons podcast, the Podcats. Every time I type that in the computer, I always write Podcats, and I have to fix it every single time.
You need to trademark that or register that domain name there.
The Podcats. Oh, yeah. My video is changing parameters again. Hey, what's going on there? Okay, well, on this podcast, I like to have people on to share their testimony, and I like to invite pastors on to basically school me, help disciple me, and disciple the hearers. And so according to your little biography here, autobiography, you are a daddyologist, it looks like. You're an expert in daddyology.
Yeah, not an expert. I don't know if you can be an expert, but I do have experience.
Well, you're finding your way. And so hopefully you can help the people that are just a couple steps behind you. All you got to be is one step ahead of the last person in order to help them along.
That's right.
So Jeff is a husband and father in Southern California and pastor, and been married for 17 years and adopted 2 children, Mariah and Levi, who I believe are actually biological brother and sister, right?
Yeah, they are. Yep.
And
we know their mother. We don't know who the fathers are. So.
Right. Okay.
Those situations.
And you were ordained as a pastor in 2010, and you went to Liberal University.
Liberty.
Liberty University. So I imagine you've been tracking with what's been going on over there.
Yes. Disappointingly. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, my experience at Liberty was excellent. I will say the professors there are top notch. The people that I dealt with, extremely knowledgeable. They have a staff that's or professors that are just amazing, and it's a well-oiled machine. You know, sad that the leadership has gone the way it has. Hopefully, they're cleaning that up. So, you know, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, maybe the bugs were exposed, so they can clean some house a little bit or something. God's working in the long game.
Amen.
We know that. So you're a church planner, and you train pastors from your home church in Fontana, California. You're the founder of spiritualgifttest.com. And just this year, you founded dad.co, and reformedapparel.com. There's a daddyology again. And you're the author of Gifted by Grace, an introduction to the Holy Spirit and spiritual gifts, a Bible study with a companion DVD, and you're currently hosting a Bible study aimed at equipping new believers called The Walk.
Yes.
Which is hosted on YouTube and on the Be the Message Church app.
That's right.
All right, so check that out, everybody. Well, I don't want to go into talking about spiritual gifts because that could be a long conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But since we last spoke, I became a cessationist.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's mostly pertaining to sign gifts, and it doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit doesn't gift people for particular things, for particular acts of service.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't mean the Holy Spirit doesn't speak through people and stuff. But as far as like sign gifts of healing and tongues and stuff, I'm gonna sit out on that one. So, but anyway, we wanted to talk about your journey in Christ and about your experience in adopting 2 beautiful young kids.
Yeah.
And so, where should we start? You want to take us all the way back?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I could definitely talk about, you know, how I grew up a little bit and what brought me to where I'm at now, I guess. A little bit of testimony. Of course, all by God's grace, that I am where I am, who I am, what I am. So I was a kid, you know, I grew up, you know, my parents were both, you know, very young when they got married. And my mom was not even 18 years old when she had me. My dad was 20 years old. So there was, which isn't, necessarily a terrible thing, but, they had issues and they divorced by the time I was like 2 years old. So me and my brother ended up growing up with my mom, and my dad was kind of a drifter. He did his own thing. He was not a huge part of our life. And then in like the third grade, we went to visit him for a couple weeks. He was living in Ohio. And he actually kept us for 6 months, which was not the plan. But it ended up being a good experience for us because we got to know our dad. And so then in 1987, 87, moved back to California with my mom. And then 2 years later, I didn't see my dad after that. We might have talked once or twice after that, but on the phone or something. But my dad passed away, and so I was like 11 years old when he died. So it took a toll on us, even though he wasn't around. It's always one of those things where it's your dad, and you always kind of hold out hope. Even as a little kid, you kind of hold out hope that you're going to have this experience, this reuniting of your family and all this. But of course, that didn't happen. And so, my mom took it really hard. She was already, basically, an alcoholic and things like that. So it just made that worse. And so all through junior high, high school, had a really, really tough experience with just my family. We didn't have money. We were poor. My mom was a waitress. That was the only income. She had 2 boys. So she did work hard. She did a lot to provide for us. I really give her a lot of credit for the hard work she did and kind of instilling that, of course, into my brother and I. So, but there was difficulties. I mean, we had lots of problems, lots of strain, relationships, and we would go to church like once or twice a year, maybe. And my mom and dad, they both believed. You'd say like they would. My dad actually bought me my first Bible. It's actually sitting back behind me. It's 35 years ago or whenever he bought me that thing. When we went to visit him, he would actually read us Bible stories. He would sit us on his lap, and me and my brother he'd read the Bible to us. And it's interesting because like the lifestyle that he and my mom lived really wasn't that great, but they always had this core belief, I guess you'd say. So that was instilled in us from an early age. A lot of my family, extended family, uncles, cousins, things like that, do believe, and they're Christians. And so we got some of that. I remember my earliest theological statement, which was incorrect, but I was about 3 or 4 years old. And I remember saying, I believe in God, but I don't believe in the devil, And my dad's cousin, the sentiment was I don't, really like him. So my dad's cousin's like, well, if you believe in God, you have to believe in the devil too. He created him. And I go, all right, well, I don't like him. That was the first theological statement I think I ever made, or at least that I can remember. And so that was from an early age. So I always knew like God exists. I kind of like had that instilled in me. I never really had a huge doubt that he existed. I just didn't know him, and I wouldn't call myself a Christian. I would have called myself a Christian, even though I wasn't, I didn't have faith in Christ. He had not, regenerated me, you'd say, at that point. So I grew up, I was very, I was a decent kid, but I would live my own life. I was going to do my own thing. I figured out how to, skate by and fly under the radar. My mom was a volatile sort of disciplinarian, and so I would just do what it took to keep the peace. And then, as soon as things were calm, I would just silently, quietly go do what I wanted to do. My brother was a little more confrontational, and so he had his own issues with my mom. But all that's past. It's good. I don't want to dishonor my parents at all, because I love them and really respect them and appreciate what they did for me. So But anyway, about high school age, 17, 18, I was a senior in high school. And I remember just having this, not all of a sudden, I don't know how you describe it, but just like conviction that I was a sinner. Like I knew like that I was not going down the right path. I was very, very prideful. I was sinful. I just had this, it just came to me. It wasn't like I went to church and somebody preached to me, but it was just all these things kind of, I don't remember the circumstances, but they just started kind of coming into my heart and like, hey, you're not right with God. Like you don't know him. You think you know, but you don't know. And so I would begin praying, and just out of ignorance, I would pray every night. And sometimes my prayers would go long into the night, like 2, 3 in the morning kind of thing. And this is while I'm in high school. So, I mean, it was just a period of time, like several weeks. And I would pray, it's funny, I would be praying very much according to like the sinner's prayer, I'd say almost the same exact things. I was just admitting my guilt. I was asking God to be my savior. I wasn't saying like, hey, Christ, come into my heart, nothing like that, because I didn't really understand that concept. But I just knew like, hey, I'm dead in my sin. God sent his son to die for me. I need him in order to be saved. And I'm asking God, please save me, and I kept asking, it's like, God, please be my savior, And so that was like, that went on for several weeks. And then, a while later we went to church, and it was a Baptist church, kind of like a general Baptist church. Really sort of, back in the day, it was a little more gospel centered. Now it's, unfortunately got like kind of a gospel light message now. But the pastor gave an invitation, and I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is how I get to heaven, because I didn't know any better. And he asks, us to say this prayer, right? And I'm saying this prayer, like I already said all this stuff. I already believe all this. I believe, and he ends it. I'm like, well, I guess I'm already a Christian. I don't know. So anyway, not fast forward, but a couple of years after that, I'm like, okay, I'm a Christian, but still have not cracked open my Bible. Still have not, I still don't understand, much of what that means. So it's debatable. Am I a Christian or not? I believe I was. I believe I was regenerated. I believe God started his work at that point. But then I had more issues with family, and my mom moved away, got remarried. I was on my own from 18 on, basically. And so that 18 to 20 year time period was sort of tumultuous. I had, I would say, a little bit of depression. I was on my own. It was like figuring out how to live in the world, like trying to survive. I remember putting literally 50 cents of gas into my 1973 Super Beetle just to get home. And I had to borrow that from somebody. It was really, really bad. So I survived, of course, by God's grace and by a lot of people's help, and eventually met my wife, who I think we both changed each other's lives, because she was Catholic. She grew up Catholic, and never really, knew the truth. Like she didn't know the gospel really, really well. So she went through all the motions, like all good Catholics do. And her parents raised her right, all the good things. Like she had both her parents. She had a great, stable family home, kind of the opposite of what I grew up with. And we met, and she invited me to Catholic church. All right, yeah, I'll go check it out, And after the first time, I'm like, yeah, I can't come back here. I'm like, this does not really seem true, even though I don't have a grounding in the truth very well. I know that this is probably not it. And so I think, again, that's just God's grace, his Holy Spirit just sort of giving me that. So I'm like, let's go to this church down the street that I used to go to. And fortunately, my wife used to go with her friends to the youth group there. And so we decided to start going there. And for 4 years, we went to this church. We basically just went on Sundays, and that was it. It was very, and they kind of made it easy to do that. So that was kind of a problem. But we didn't know. We were just like, hey, we're going to church. We're Christians. We go to church on Sundays. We never really met anybody. We never really, we knew people. We would see them and we would wave, and that was it. Like we would literally go to church and then leave, and then that was the extent of our experience. No, really.
It wasn't a lifestyle. It was just a weekly event.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were committed as well. We didn't miss, but it wasn't. It wasn't like transformational. It wasn't like our lives were changed. It was just like sort of added on. You know what I mean? Instead of it being core, like God being the core, it was like, okay, we're adding this on. And so that was, and unfortunately in the culture and in the church, that's too common. It's really, really kind of what they expect. But they did do something that helped us, which was they would have like membership classes. And so like, hey, every month they would mention this. And I kind of just got convicted, like we need to be involved in church. Like we're here, been coming here 4 years, we haven't done anything. We should be involved. I felt like God was prompting me to be in some sort of a ministry, not position, but like be involved and serve. And so we did that. Went through the process. And that was where I first heard of spiritual gifts, because they had a class on spiritual gifts and personality, and then they did an interview, and then they placed you in ministry from there. And so it was all kind of at once. This happened. We were going through this process of understanding and learning how to connect into the body of Christ. And at the same time, I met a guy at work who, his name was Tony. He was about my age now. He's like 40, 41. And he was a bivocational pastor. He was from South Central LA, sort of like real charismatic. And so we would talk, and I'd see him at work, and he's doing this tough work. I was doing kind of a difficult job at that time. And
Was he Mexican?
No, he is black.
Okay.
And I love him. I mean,
for some reason, pastors from the hood are always charismatic.
It's true.
And I knew some Mexican ones, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, he had a Pentecostal sort of bent, but he was actually otherwise very solid. In fact,
well, I meant charismatic in personality, not in theology.
Yeah, he did believe in like a dual baptism of the Holy Spirit, things like that. And so we went through all that stuff and figured that stuff out. But so I started talking to him, like, man, this guy's so joyous, though. He had like the joy of God in him. So I was like, what's wrong with you, man? I was really kind of trying to figure out myself as a believer. Like I knew at this point, I believe I was regenerated, and God had already grabbed a hold of me, and he was drawing me to himself. And I was really at that point seeking to know him more. And so it kind of worked out that I met this guy, and he's like, well, what do you believe and all this? And I was like, well, I believe in God, I believe Jesus is the Savior, all the basics. And he's like, well, do you read the Bible? I was like, no, I don't. I'm kind of intimidated. I don't know what the Bible says. I don't know how to study it. I don't know where to start. And so he actually took me under his wing and started teaching me how to study the Bible, how to read. I think we started in 1 John, and then we went to the Gospel of John, and then we went to the Gospel. So we started this process. And the interesting thing is he had these books, and they were doctrine books from Dr. Harold Wilmington, who was teaching from the Liberty Home Bible Institute, which is Liberty University's first sort of home correspondence
curriculum.
Study. Yeah, that was their curriculum. And it's actually pretty good for what it was. And he had all these different books on the doctrine of man, the doctrine of sin. And so I started with with theology. I started, hey, what is this? It was like a systematic theology along with reading the Bible. So it really, I think, set me on a good place and started me off. And so I started studying the Bible. And this is kind of the part where things changed a little bit. Within, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of studying the Bible and like starting to learn, I was like, this is just all new, just hitting me, right? I felt and I use that term because I don't have another term for it, but I experienced like a calling, right, of God, like a conviction And I told Tony, I was like, Tony, went to work one day. I go, hey, man, this is crazy to me, but I really feel like God wants me to be a pastor. And I was like, I don't know why. Like, I just have this real strong calling, this conviction in my heart. And he's funny. He was like, oh, really? He's like, his wife, her name was Mona Lisa. And she had a more charismatic personality than he did. She's about not even 5 foot tall, a ball of joy, and a evangelists. You know, both of them were evangelists. But he's like, oh yeah, Mona Lisa had a dream the other night that you were preaching in front of 1,000 people. So I'm like, I don't know what that means, but that scared me. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do this, because I believe like, hey, maybe that was going to come true. So
yeah.
So I was just like, all right, well, I kind of ran from it then. So I was like, I'm not going to be a pastor. So I was in college. My first major was mechanical engineering, and then that didn't work out. I just didn't feel a calling to that. I didn't really feel like it was for me. Then I went to history, which I enjoyed history. Then I changed it to business. And so this is all within a 3-year period after this. I'm just trying to do anything else but be a pastor. And so kind of like Jonah, right? Just like, all right, God, no. So finally, after 3.5 years or so, maybe 4 years almost, I was like, okay, I have to follow what God wants me to do, because I really couldn't shake this conviction. I was like, I'm not obeying God. You know, he wants me to be a pastor. I know he does. And it was something that just grabbed hold of me, and I couldn't shake it. So by God's grace, he kept that, burden on me. And so finally got fired from my job. I was stupid and young and doing dumb stuff. Got fired from my job 6 months before I was supposed to be married. And then right at that same time was when we were taking these classes at church and became members, and we got plugged into ministry. Started with high school ministry. Did that for 2 years. And really what's cool, like the youth pastor, he's a little bit younger than me, but he was real gracious. And he's like, all right, I'm going to let you slowly learn how to teach, slowly learn how to, exercise your gifts, be a shepherd. And so he would give me opportunities. And then, so I would start once a month. I would teach on a Sunday at the youth group class, and then it turned into twice a month. And then
How old were you at this time?
I was 25, I want to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 25.
Okay.
And so, a long time ago. So,
how old are you now?
I'm 42.
Okay. We're peers then.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah.
None of this gray existed 5 years ago. That's from the kids.
We still got 40 more good years in us.
Oh, at least.
Go hard.
At least. Yeah. So there's no stopping us, man. So, but so I started in youth ministry. Then 2 years later, I was teaching almost every Sunday at this point, and teaching lots and lots of lessons. Not very well, but still growing in that gift.
Using flannel board?
Oh yeah, no. I remember the first. Let me grab this as an example. The first lesson I taught, I typed it out. It's only about 3/4 of a page. It was at a youth group pool party, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to teach the lesson." All right. Oh man. Okay. I typed it out. All I did was this. I was reading it, read it for like 37 seconds, and I go, "All right, let's pray." That was it. So I mean, I had to start somewhere, and he gave me that. His name was Weston Oxley, great guy. He gave me that opportunity, and so that was really helpful. So then eventually I started teaching quite a bit, and then the junior high pastor left to go to seminary, and they asked me to step in and do that job. So I did that for 2.5 years, and so through this process, obviously God has saved me, he's convicted me of my sin, He's made me who I am in Christ. Like he's done all this great work. And I basically had Calvinist leanings, right? Like I was basically a Calvinist. So we ended up leaving the church that we were at for a while, and that was mainly because we felt like we just weren't being convicted of our sin. We weren't really feeling bad about the things that we were doing wrong. And then my wife and I was overcommitted. I was in school, seminary. I was working full time. I was leading this ministry, doing all kinds of stuff, and our marriage was really suffering. So the first decision was, hey, we need to step back from ministry. And then at that point, we're like, well, maybe we really need to step away from this church and look elsewhere. And I felt like we wouldn't normally just like church hop. This is after 8 years of being at this church. So we ended up going to another church. And from that church is where 2 years later, we ended up planting in Fontana, where I'm still at. I don't know why God keeps bringing me to Fontana, but some reason. It's only one city over. But planted, that lasted 4 years. And then my wife and I, we decided, hey, we want to be parents. And we were going to do it through foster and adoption. And that was just how God was leading us. And so when I decided to take a sabbatical for that, unfortunately, our church dissolved. And then we ended up back at our church that we planted out of. We came back to that church for 6 years. And then just to kind of catch you up to date, we helped plant a house church.
So the church I just want to clarify, the church you left, because you said you had a more Calvinistic leanings and they weren't convicting you of sin, was the same church that sent you out to church plant? Or there was another? I'm sorry, I missed there was another one after that.
That church we left after 8 years. We went to a new church that was more in line with our theology and our convictions. And then after 2 years being there.
After 2 years.
Yeah, so there was a 2-year process. We actually got hooked up with the Southern Baptist Convention because they're an SBC church. And they have what's called church planter catalysts. It's a guy that basically just goes out and helps people plant churches. His name is Don Overstreet, who amazing guy. Not necessarily a Calvinist or anything like that, but just an amazing servant of God. Like I will always.
All amazing Christians are not Calvinists. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But there are. I say that tongue in cheek. I say there's a lot of Christians I disagree with that are amazing. Amazing Christians.
If you look on my, I've got Responsible Grace, from Wesley's on my bookshelf. I got all kinds of competing ideas and competing theological ideas, but we all share a common conviction that Christ saved us, and like that we're saved by grace. And so, there's differences, but we're able to overcome those and still be in fellowship. So anyway, we end up planting, and then we end up from that 4 years later, starting the process of becoming foster adoptive parents, and then just to kind of catch you up to speed, a year and a half ago. So we stayed at this church for 6 years after we came back from planting. And then a year and a half ago, we helped a house church plant for a year. And that, a lot of things changed there. It was all good stuff, but people's lives changed, and we ended up coming back out of there. And that's why I'm at the church I'm at now, which is with Be the Message Church, which I've known their pastor and been close friends with him for 10, 11 years. And I've preached at their church dozens of times and at their conferences and things like that. So we've always been really tight and close, and our family is like their family and vice versa. So we feel like we're at home. So it's really, really been good. So that's kind of where we're at now. And, I'm able to teach and preach and all the things that, God's called and gifted me to do.
Weren't you doing a home church plant?
Yeah. So that's what we did. We started a year and a half ago.
Okay.
We did a house church plant that, again, it was great. I actually love the house church model. I love the intimacy of it, the ability for everybody to sort of contribute. And it's very in line, of course, with the scriptures and how things were going on in the early church. And I think my conviction is that that church will sort of shift more towards that model. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I mean, especially like right now with all this crazy pandemic stuff going on, if we'd had a lot of that in place, it wouldn't have disrupted the church so much. So I think I think it's got its place. I think it definitely it was a blessing to us. We were able to meet throughout most of the pandemic. We still met together. There was 10 adults and 10 children. It was great. And so we just we were a community, we're a family, and so it was really great. But life changes and things like that happened, and so ended up people moved, people changed, where they were basically, and so that ended up dissolving too. But everybody's in a good spot, and the timing, is just perfect because Pastor Paul asked me for me the message to help him, and it was perfect timing because one of his pastors was going off to be a missions pastor at another church. He was sending him off this Pastor Paul. If you don't know him, I know you don't, but he's a sending pastor. He's a multiplying pastor. So he'll give the best of the people he's raised up. They go out, and so this church has remained small, but yet they've planted 4, 5, 6 churches in the last 7, 8 years. So that's just what he does. So he sent them out, and he was like, "Hey, can you come help me?" And so that's what we're doing now. And so that's kind of like the bulk of my journey, you'd say, my testimony.
All right. So I have some questions for you.
Yeah. Shoot.
So when I met you, you were a fairly young church planter.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of years in.
Yep.
And so you did Liberty by correspondence then.
Yeah, I did distance learning through Liberty. So I actually started at Liberty in 2006, and then I finished my bachelor's and I got a master's of arts from Liberty in 2008. And then there was a gap of about 7 years, and then I went back to Liberty in 2014. 15, I'm sorry. And I was like, hey, we don't have kids. This is the time for me to finish my MDiv. I won't be able to do it any other way. And so, but it's like, well, how am I going to pay for it? I want to get it done. How am I going to have time for it? I was working full time as I always have been. I've always been bivocational. So I was like, how do I do this? And if you remember, I said, when I went to school before, Michelle and I were having, marital issues because I was so overcommitted. And so she wasn't necessarily for me going back to school right away. We talked, and I go, look, we don't have kids. I can do this without disrupting anything. I think I can make it happen. And so we just negotiated. She's like, all right, well, if God pays for it, we don't want to take it out of the budget. We don't want to take out loans. I was like, all right. That was the condition. I go, I'll agree to that. And so at that same kind of time, the website, the Spiritual Gifts website, started really taking off, and I was able to almost to the dollar sometimes just pay my school as I went. And so that was really good. And ended up getting a Master of Divinity in 2016, which is kind of funny, not funny. It was sad for my wife because we got my daughter at the end of 2015, and I was already in school for 6 months, and I had another year to go. So the first year of my daughter's life was difficult, especially for my wife. She probably felt like a single parent at times, but we made it through.
All right. And I'm going to ask you a little bit about that in a minute. Yeah. But you don't strike me as someone who's very feminine. Seems like the Lord gave you your fair share of portion of testosterone.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's okay.
Well, two brothers raised by a single mother. You didn't spend a lot of time with your dad. Did you have some strong male role models, or are you just naturally manly?
I just naturally, man. It's definitely not like Samson or anything, but I did have some good role models throughout that God placed in my life. I think not necessarily Christian men though. I played sports, so one of the things I did to sort of that really helped me not go down a bad path, I'd say, or too bad of a path, was being athletic and being in sports. And I had friends who we played sports all the time. It didn't matter what sport, baseball, basketball, football, whatever it was, mostly football and basketball. So when I was in high school, I played 4 years of football, and that was like my passion. I really excelled at it. I was just really good at that time. And then I worked out 2 to 4 hours a day, just really into health. So that kept me away from drugs and alcohol. Never did any drugs or alcohol in high school. And so, that sort of helped. And then I did have some good mentors, my coaches. I had some really solid coaches that instilled some really valuable lessons in me about not quitting, about being a man of your word, just about being tough. I had to be tough. There was no, I was sort of the man of the house, since I was a kid. And so I was always protecting my brother from the stuff he would get himself into sometimes. And then, I guess it just kind of came with the territory. Yeah. I look at that a lot, how I grew up and how it's, again, I just attribute it all to God's grace, that I am a man and that I've have certain values that I have.
That you know that.
Yeah, that I know that. Very, very much convicted of my gender. And
you're in California.
Oh yeah, I'm in the middle. That's
God's grace.
It is all God's grace. Surprisingly, there's a lot of people in my area that are like me, actually. So it's good. Again, by God's grace, He always, I think, keeps a remnant, right? So
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to ask. So, how much can you bench press now?
I actually have my weight rack outside. I can probably bench about 275, which is not. It's not that great, but it's. I think it's fine.
275 is not bad at all. Yeah. I can't do that anymore.
2 years ago, though, I wouldn't. When I was in high school, I could bench 325, 335, whatever it was, and then you work and you forget. And you don't.
Theology.
Yeah, it's just like you concentrate on other things, and then I started with push-ups last year, and then I was like, I'm going to just start doing push-ups. So I can do 50 or 60 push-ups in a row now, which is great. But it's I still don't get enough time to lift. So it's what it is. I'm fine with where I'm at. I will get stronger, but yeah.
Yeah. I just try to get 20, 30 minutes of cardio HIIT exercise in every day, just so I don't slowly deteriorate. But I'm not always faithful with it, but I'm trying to get there.
My father-in-law is 70 years old, and he's about 5'6", maybe 155 pounds, and can bench press more than me, and can hike way more than I can, and he's just super athletic. So he puts me to shame, and he's such a gracious guy.
Well, that's always impressive, but myself, I don't want that. I just see that staying healthy is enough. Maybe a little bit strong, but to put so much time, like half of your life, into maintaining your health, I think you need a balance of just enough to keep yourself healthy and fit a little bit. Don't make it about looks. Don't make it about, what people think or anything like that. Just make it about health so that you can serve God well and try to keep your heart there. That's my own personal take, because when you unless you're like a trainer, I can understand if that's your profession, or if you're an athlete, professional athlete, then I can understand it. But when you give 3 hours of every day to the gym, That's a lot of your life.
That was my routine, man. When I was in high school, I mean, I was very vain, very, very proud. I was all about strength. I wanted to be the strongest guy in my school. I was like, I don't care what size I am. So it was all pride related, and then looks, right? So, but now it's more, hey, I just want to be strong because I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old that I don't want to, not be able to play with them, run around with them. I jump on the trampoline with my kids, and we run around. I push them on the bike, I tow them on the bike. We do all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, I need to be there for them, and I need to show them that an active life is a good life too, and I'm not lazy. So, and then of course you want to serve God long. He's obviously, he's the one that gives us every breath, so he's going to sustain us as long as he wants to, but you don't want it to be a strain on your own self and a distraction, because, if your body's healthy, your mind is good too. So it all kind of goes together. But speaking, I was talking about my father-in-law, and if there's ever a man who has influenced me, it's him, as far as being a man, being a godly man, and being a servant, and being humble. He's more of a father than I've ever had in my whole life. So I honor him really great, and my mother-in-law. I mean, she's an amazing woman too. So like they are huge influences in my life. But my father-in-law, he grew up Catholic. In fact, when we planted our church, he comes to me and he goes, Jeff, I love you. I'm happy you're doing what you're doing. Please don't ask me to join your church because I'm Catholic. I was born a Catholic and I'll die a Catholic. I'm always going to be a Catholic. 2 years later, he got saved and was in our church.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and my mother-in-law too. And they started a small group.
Never say never.
I know. It's awesome. So we actually ended up merging with another church, and that pastor had grown up as an Irish Catholic, and then he got saved and was the only Protestant in his whole family. And so he was part of our church. He was the pastor that we merged with, and him and I were really close. And we started doing small groups and Bible studies at homes. Well, my in-laws decided, hey, when we merged, they're like, there was some turmoil with them. My mother-in-law didn't like that the Catholic Church had purchased a $5,000 chair for the priest to sit in. So she was like, I'm not going there anymore. And so my father-in-law was like, well, I want to go worship with my wife. I don't want to go alone. And at the same time, our church merged with this other church, and they had a building, and we were meeting in a school before and all this. And he was just like, no, I don't want to do that kind of stuff. And when we got a building, he's like, all right, we're going to go to your church. We're going to check it out, because I want to be with my wife. So it ended up, God orchestrated all this stuff. And then they met this pastor, Pastor Mike, who was a former Catholic. So he understood all the details and intricacies and the culture behind that and the theology behind that. And then we go, hey, we're going to start small groups. And my in-laws are very hospitable. They're like, hey, we'll host it at our house if Pastor Mike will just lead it. And so the first book they studied was John Piper's 50 Reasons Christ Came to Die, which is basically a year's worth of gospel messages. And through that process, they got saved. And that small group, even though that church dissolved, that small group of 9 or 10 people is still going every Wednesday night, which is also pretty awesome. They all go to different churches, but they all gather together, and it's really remarkable. So lots of good fruit came out of that. But again, my father-in-law is just he's an amazing guy. I love him. I just think he's the biggest influence in my life as far as being a man, and I mean, I take care of his daughter. He's a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout. Both of his sons are Eagle Scouts. I mean, he's lived a remarkable life and just an honorable life. So yeah, that's a huge thing that I didn't want to miss. In our conversation. It's
a grace from God in your life.
Oh yeah, by far.
So when you were talking about when you were young, how your family had this, awareness or belief in God, and that you never really had a model of prayer, but you would pray late into the night and stuff. I was thinking that basically, you were called into God, and the Holy Spirit was working on you early. Yeah. And then the verse that ran through my mind is Romans 1, how everyone knows there's a God. But some people seem to say yes, I know there's a God. They might not know much about him, but they just are honest that they believe, and others suppress that knowledge.
Exactly.
So I see kind of this combination of Romans 1 and then the Holy Spirit just early on working and speaking to you, seem to be sensitive to different ways the Holy Spirit was working on your life.
Yeah.
And so just curious if you would agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, 100%. I always thought, when I was first saved and I first understood that God saved me, I always thought, well, maybe, I know it's the work of God, but I really feel too that people were praying for me, and I know, not that that's changing God's mind or anything, but I just feel like there was a lot of probably spiritual warfare going on around me, just because of the place that I was in, and God was, in the midst of that. He had his plan, so I was going to be saved no matter what. But I just really feel like He saved me, and others prayed for me, and then of course the Holy Spirit was always, I think I had protection, like people have testimonies where, they went through all this garbage and they went through the drugs and the alcohol and the sex and the this and the that, and I had some of that. I'm not going to glorify any of that or share any of that because it's a disgrace, but, God kept me from a large chunk of that, because being an athlete, being very popular, with the girls and all that, like I'm not trying
to. So the sin of pride in the gym kept you from the sin of destroying your mind with drugs. Well,
it's interesting, right?
Use things in interesting ways.
And it's that, but also knowing, like, I did have a moral compass. I would say, like, God wouldn't let me do certain things, I think, just based on like, I don't want to be that kind of person. And so he had, I think that's just him keeping me from the sin that I would commit if I were just totally, didn't have him, just full on depraved, right? Like I was depraved, but he kept me from things. So, I think that's actually in my opinion, it's a better testimony to be spared of those things. And still saved, because it's, I think, a lot of times harder for a moral person or a person that thinks they're good to be saved. And so I think it's just God's grace, obviously it's all God's grace that he didn't let me go so far. That
kind of ties in maybe to how you went to church as a like a moral routine later on, but it wasn't transformational until later.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's again, I always look back, I look at my conversion or my, whatever you want to call it, regeneration. It's just like, I wouldn't have chosen that. I didn't know anything. I didn't have, even the crazy thing, like when I was praying, like I was telling you as a high school student, when I would pray, I think back and I look back at what I was praying, and it was really theologically sound. And I go, where did that come from? Like, how did I know these things? How did I understand this gospel? And, I just had fragments of it. And it wasn't like I just had someone explain it to me, and yet I still had this understanding. And so that's not something that comes from your natural brain. It's not something that you understand or believe or follow naturally. So I look at it as like, okay, God saved me. He wanted to save me. I don't know why, no reason. He just did it. So yeah, that's kind of where I land with it.
Well, he has some specific outcome in mind for your life, and he got started early on it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So your wife was a Catholic, and then she became a Christian.
Yep.
How was her transition, reasoning through that stuff?
She, we walked kind of together, because when I was going through this study and learning the Bible and stuff with Tony, she was there with me. This journey was very much together. We got baptized on the same day, at our church. And so we walked this very much together, and we've always kind of done that. And I think God worked on her differently. She had the core, she had the catechism, and she had the the things that are instilled in you as
some knowledge of the Bible.
Yeah. She had those things. Like she'll be able to recite it, but it wasn't transformational. She would say, I didn't know Jesus in the Catholic Church. She's like, I didn't know him. I didn't have a relationship with God. I wasn't saved there. And it took that same sort of process that I went through. Again, by God's grace, he brought us together, and then he walked us both down the same path. And she would have been more of an Arminian at first. And then through just us both studying together and looking at the scriptures, we both
But she wasn't fighting it or anything. She wasn't like, no way, I'm saved by works.
No. No. She's my wife is a very wise and strong person. She's very discerning, very I'm blessed to have her as my wife. But she's sort of quiet at first, but when she says something, it's like, okay, yeah, it's solid. Like, she's not going to just waste her words or waste her thoughts. She's going to find out the truth and she's going to go after it. So, by God's grace, he's given me her as a partner and as, a beautiful wife for my family and my children and things like that. So, it's just, we walked it together, and we kind of both came through the process of God's grace and regeneration very similarly, I'd say.
Okay. So you mentioned something about you got fired from a job.
Oh, yeah.
You were young and being stupid, but if I or something like, I don't remember if you said it that way, but you said, if I remember the timeline right, you've actually been in church for a while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you were in church, but you were...
It was right before all this, like right before we... is while we were still kind
of... Not that Christians can't ever get fired from their job, but I'm just curious about the process that was happening from early theology to theology now to young Christian, kind of messed up maybe in the world, to spiritual maturity. Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Again, I think it was definitely a process of maturation, right, and sanctification. And it wasn't like I, was completely, what's the word?
Hellraiser?
I knew what was right and I knew what was wrong. Okay. And then I had a lapse in judgment for a while, and that's the time that I really, so it wasn't like I was way down and I was just, it's not a linear thing. It was like, okay, I knew better. And then I kind of had a lapse, and then I go, okay. And then, but still, I'm not going to go into the details of what I did. And it's just not, it wasn't good. So got fired, rightfully so. And I made amends. I did all that with the former employer. So I didn't, at the end of all this, it's not like, I hold a grudge or anything like that. It was just, okay, we settled it and we're good. But then the first couple of years of my marriage, it's really hard because I couldn't find a job. I was working 2 jobs. I was throwing newspapers, and I was working, I finally was working at the cabinet shop that they own, and I was making very little money, working a lot. So yeah, when I said that, I remember I told you that I took over the junior high ministry. So I was working 2 part-time jobs, going to school full-time, and they wanted me to take over this ministry. And so I'm like, that's too much stuff. And my wife's like, yeah, it's too much stuff. So I was like, all right, but I really feel God wants me to do this. Like he's leading in this, and I think we need to be obedient. And I think I need to get another job, just one job, get rid of my 2 jobs, 2 part-time jobs. I need 1 full-time job. And so I'll tell you a little story real quick. So we said yes. My wife was involved in that decision, of course, and we said yes, we're going to do it. And so they announced on a Wednesday night, they announced to the junior high kids that, hey, the old pastor is leaving and Jeff's coming in. And that was on a Wednesday night. And I go, I need to find a job ASAP. I mean, this is going to start in a week or two. And so that was on a Wednesday night. Thursday, I had to work in the day. And then at night, I got online. I'm like, hey, I need to look on monster.com back in the day, for a job. And so I started looking for a job. Meanwhile, in the carport of my mobile home, my brother-in-law and my wife, my brother-in-law is a mechanic. He's working on my wife's car, and we're pretty broke at this point, and so he's helping us out. And I'm literally on my computer, my desktop, with the mouse, and I'm looking on the computer for jobs. I'm not looking. I used to do fire alarm systems, and I wasn't looking in that industry. I'm like, I just need to find one job. I don't care what it is. And no joke, 8 o'clock at night, 8:15 at night, the phone, back when you had a phone, that wasn't a cell phone, it was just a phone. The phone rings. And I go, pick up the phone. Hello. And this guy's talking. He goes, hey, I know you don't know me, but da-da-da-da-da. He starts talking. I go, it's a telemarketer. So I was like, I almost just hung up on him. I was like, no, I'll let the guy speak. And my wife thinks I'm funny that I do that. But I was like, I'll let the guy talk. But this time was good because he's like, hey, I know you don't know me, but I heard that you worked in the fire alarm industry before, and my company's hiring. And I'm sitting here like, hold on a second. I didn't apply for any jobs. And yet I'm actively on the computer looking for a job, not in the fire alarm industry, at 8:15 at night. And I get a phone call at that exact moment. And this guy asked me to come in for an interview. And I'm sitting here like, okay, this doesn't normally happen. So I attribute it obviously to God orchestrating this. He's like, look, you're faithful. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry. Like, all that's in the past is gone. I want to take care of you. And I know I really feel like he's like blessing obedience, right? And so I go, well, what's the pay and all this? And the guy tells me, he's like, oh, it's all prevailing wage and this and that, which prevailing wage means you're getting like top dollar for what you do. And essentially it was like double what I was making or more. So I go out and I hang up the phone. I'm like, I don't even know how this guy found me. I'm like, I don't know how he got my number. And he wouldn't even tell me, because he was like, don't worry about it. I got your number. I'm like, it was really strange. And so finally,
sounds adventurous.
Yeah. So I go, so I checked out the company.
It's like Gandalf showing up to Bilbo Baggins' door out of nowhere.
Yeah, you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense. So I go out and I tell my wife, I go, hey, I just got this offer and it's X amount of dollars per hour. And they want me to go in for an interview tomorrow. And fortunately I had the day off the next day. And she was like, huh, what? This is crazy. And I go, yeah, I didn't apply for this job. They just called me at the moment that I'm looking for a job online. So I don't know. This is crazy. And my brother-in-law still talks about that moment. And so I end up going to the interview. I got the job, and then from the interview, went to the cabinet shop, gave them my notice, and gave the notice to the newspaper that I was working at. And I had already given a request for vacation. So I worked a week. The second week I went on vacation, but that was to the youth group camp for a week. So I worked a week, went to the camp with the youth group kids for a week, and then came back, and on that Monday had a new job, a new ministry, and I was making more than double what I was making before.
Wow.
So it was like this
Praise
miraculous
God.
thing. And I found out later it was a guy. So my new boss, his roommate was a musician. He and him are musicians. It ended up being a guy that I hadn't talked to in like 2 years, who they moved in together, like doing some music together and stuff as roommates. And then he's like, hey, do you know anybody who does fire alarms or electrical work? And he's like, yeah, I think I do. And he had my number. I hadn't talked to this guy in over 2 years. And so it ended up just being the timing impeccable, God's timing. And so from that point on, we were in ministry, and we just started going down that path, and really God blessed us from that point on. Never have worried about a job since then, or finances or anything. It's just always kind of been okay. But yeah, we've got
Nice.
lots of miracle stories like that.
Yeah, those are great. Those are always great. We're running low on time, so if you could tell me real quick, you talked about how you started having Calvinistic leanings, but you were in a non-Calvinistic church.
Yeah.
Was that just by going through the Bible on your own and working through those things, or were you listening to certain preachers outside of your normal circle? How did that come about?
So the youth pastor that I told you about, his name is Weston Oxley. He's sort of directed me to like John MacArthur and some of the more conservative, because he was trying to teach me how to teach. He's like, hey, you can listen to these guys and stuff like that. So MacArthur was really my first, Calvinistic influence, you would say. And then from there, I started, I can't remember who else, but just that group of people. And, I used certain resources that were more Calvinistic and just made more sense. Theologically, biblically, it just lined up more with what the Bible says. And so I just always, I never like said, oh, the pastor says this, so I've got to believe that. I always said, all right, what does the Bible say? You got to be a Berean, right? That's what they say. You got to go check for yourself to see if these things are true. And so, our pastor would kind of joke, because we were in a small group with the youth pastor and others too, and we had our own tight knit, and they were all Calvinistic people. So our pastor would kind of joke and say, hey, how's your other church going? Because that small group was like a church within the church, right? So it was just kind of funny. But
how long was that process?
So what was the question?
How long was that process of thinking through those things?
It was over a period of probably a year or less. I pretty quickly go, yeah, this sounds right.
Did it cost you any? I'm sorry. Did it cost you anything?
No, there are of course people who don't agree with that.
Right.
But I wasn't like I didn't have really a cage stage sort of Calvinistic experience. I just
you don't have to have I know what you mean, but it doesn't have to be a cage stage. But sometimes when you change your theology, it can cost you opportunities. Other people, while you might be charitable, other people might not be.
Oh yeah. I know for certain my theology made it so that I would never preach on a Sunday in the main service. So that was part of the reason I was like, hey, I need to move on, because I'm not going to be able to preach this way. And that wasn't even necessarily, part of it was being a Calvinist, and part of it was being masculine and actually convicting of sin. Like I said, like we didn't have that. It was more like, hey, we want you to feel good. We want to make sure we don't offend you and this and that. And I think preaching is offensive. It has to be, even to the believer. Like we have to be confronted with our sin and with the things that are besetting, that God doesn't want there, and He's trying to strip us up, and get rid of. And so if we just let things be and we're just trying to tickle ears, that's not going to help anybody.
How and is there any specific ways does your theological progression has practically blessed your life?
Well, of course, I think certainly understanding God's sovereignty and His grace puts.
What does that do for you?
It puts into perspective who you are, how you're to live, and how you're to really have faith. It's not. You're not sitting out here like, oh no, what's going to happen? You just trust, because you know that the one who holds it all in His hands has it all in His hands, and He's got, a plan. So when troubles come, when stress comes, if you want to talk about adoption, difficulty comes and adversity. If you're not sure of your God and His sovereignty, you're going to have a very difficult time with that. And you're going to question His goodness. You're going to question His powerfulness, His omnipotence. You're going to question His character when bad things come, right? And So it's given me the right perspective of God. So where I honor him and I trust him and I go, look, Lord, I know that Romans 8:28 is true. And it's not because all things are just going to be great in my life. It's because you have a plan. And no matter what comes in my life, any adversity, any blessing, whatever it is all according to your plan. And it's not for the purpose of me just having an easy and happy life. It's for the conformity of myself to the image of Christ. And so that is just, it's not just theological. It shifts almost every aspect of how you live your life. You know, it changes how you look at the world, at your own experiences, your own efforts, how you view God. I mean, your theology matters. It matters how you view God and his sovereignty. If you don't have that, you have some very difficult questions to ask. You know, is God powerful? Can he do what he said he's going to do? Is he going to do it? Is he good? You know, you're going to question these things, you know, because you're looking at circumstances, you're looking at experiences, you're looking at things that are happening. You're like, hey, this doesn't line up with what I think. You know, it's like, no, it's perfectly theologically correct and attributed in the Bible and witnessed in the Bible. Like it's happened to others before, and yet God has been glorified in all of it. So practically speaking, yeah, I mean, it's changed my entire mind. I guess you say it's renewed my mind. You could say it's changed my perspective to the right perspective, to where I trust, you know, more than I ever could have in the other side of things, right? How did that answer your question?
Yes. How's parenting going for you? What made you guys choose to adopt?
Yeah.
And how do you do it? I mean, who do you look to as a model in that, as a father?
So, you know, looking back at being a father and having a father who was very distant and very gone, very not involved, that certainly affects how you view God as father, right? You're going to compare God to your earthly father. It's just kind of inevitable. But you shouldn't, that shouldn't stay that way, right? You shouldn't attribute to God the things that your father is and did. And so at first, certainly I was like, hey, God's just far away. He's not really interested in what I'm doing. You know, he's just doing his own thing. And then I'm sort of a side issue for him. And that's not true. So overcoming that took a while. It was a process of kind of understanding theologically and understanding what God is doing. That no, God is intimately involved in your life, and he wants to know you and wants you to know him. Like there's that personal relationship that's important. And he also wants to give you wisdom, wants to guide you, wants to teach you and show you how to be a father. And so learning how God is as a father and learning that, of course, he adopts us. We have the spirit of adoption. That's definitely a blessing to know as an adopted parent, and to understand the depth of that. The depth of the love that I have for my kids, and to know like, hey, God loves me more than that, and in multifaceted ways, deeper than that, is truly remarkable. So, you know, we walked into the hospital to pick up my daughter. She was 2 weeks old. She was premature by 6 weeks. So she was 4.5 pounds when we picked her up, and we set eyes on her, and I cannot describe that experience of instant love and instant protection and instant like, this is my kid, and that has given me. So I mean, I could back up a little bit if you don't mind. I don't know how much time I have, but so
that's okay. If I need to, I'll split it into two.
Okay.
2 parts.
A year before we got my daughter, we were actually placed with another child. He was 3 days old. We got a call. It was a Friday morning. They're like, hey, there's a 3-day-old baby at the hospital. you guys want to go pick him up? And we're like, yeah. So my wife promptly quit her job because that was all pre-planned. So it wasn't like they were shocked or anything, but we drove to the hospital. We purchased a car seat on the way. We got this little baby boy, 3 days old, and we asked them questions, but the social workers weren't really forthcoming with us. And they're like, hey, the mom is got issues. Let's just say there's no dad involved. So likely this kid is going to be adopted to, whoever takes him. So we're like, awesome. So we take him home. They're like, hey, it's a Friday. They're like, hey, on Wednesday, there's a court hearing. We'll call you and let you know what that's all about. And so, And so Wednesday comes, we had this boy for 6 days. And again, when I looked at him and my wife looked at him, it's an immediate connection. There's an immediate attachment. That's the word that psychologists use in people in that social workers and things, attachment, right? There is an immediate attachment. And I think God just does that. Mm-hmm. It's personal. And so I looked at him, I said, this is my son. That's just what it is. There's no question. And for 6 days, he was my son and my wife's son. And then on Wednesday, they called us and they said, hey, the biological father showed up to the court and they're going to give the child to him. And I'm like, I didn't even know he was around, And so they literally, we had a few hours and they took him back. And that it was gut wrenching. So in a small way, we had, we lost the son. And mm-hmm. for a year after that, we really mourned through that process quite a bit. We had, it was a really hard time, and we felt betrayed by the social workers, and then just saddened that we cared for this little baby whom we loved, and even gave nickname. We called him Little Bird because he would just open his mouth and you'd look up at you and open his mouth, like for food or bottle or whatever. And so, and it was just a really difficult experience. And so we mourned, we grieved over that. But we knew, okay, God gave us him for a week for a reason. At the very least, we loved him as our own, and every child needs that. And we provided that, and we had a connection with him. And so a year and a few months later, December 4th of 2015, we got a call again on a Friday morning. Hey, there's a 2-week-old baby girl. Do you guys want to go pick her up? And we weren't, we were kind of shocked. And it's almost like the same situation. Mom has got issues. There's no dad. And there's court hearings and all this. And so, we go, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. So we end up picking up my daughter. And on December 4th, 2015, she was born in November. So a couple weeks old, premature, not even 5 pounds, so tiny. But again, we laid eyes on her and we just both wept. My wife and I were just overwhelmed. I mean, she's just a beautiful kid. And, still we were a little bit nervous, right? We didn't know what was going to happen. But we had decided long before this, hey, if this is how God uses us, so be it. We are going to be obedient because if God places us with the child, there's a purpose and a reason behind it. And so, it kind of taught us when we lost our son, a little bit more of the gospel, right? How that crushing of the sun, and that, I don't know, it just kind of made me think of, God's son dying, right? And then, not that there was a permanent, that was a permanent thing, but it's just kind of one of those things. And I've had friends whose children have died. It's nothing compared to that, but it just kind of gave me a deeper appreciation for the love of God for his son and what it meant for him to crush his own son on my behalf. And so when I got my daughter, that was always on my heart, okay. And so we picked up my daughter and life changed overnight again. She is her own person, even as a little baby. But she was so sweet. We had to feed her kind of every couple hours because she was premature, and so there was a lot of sleepless nights. I remember I actually remember being grateful for those times, because I would get up. My wife would get up mostly because I was working, but there were times I'm like, I'm going to get up and I let my wife sleep, and then I go just have those moments with my little girl, and it's like 3 a.m, whatever it is, and you really, it sounds strange, but you appreciate those things, because they really bond you together with your baby, your kid. And so again, I was her dad. I was always going to be her dad no matter what. And I could tell you I could tell you another story that's a little bit charismatic, but I don't think too much for you. You might appreciate it.
I believe God does miracles.
No, I do too. I'm not saying that I'm just kind of poking fun.
Right.
With it.
Okay.
But, so my daughter was born. We got her 2 weeks when she was 2 weeks old. And my neighbors across the street, they had a premature baby. I mean, he was born, 10 or 11, 12 weeks early. So he was really premature. So they understood, hey, we got to stay away for a little while before we can visit, because, there's medical issues. So we didn't take her to church. We didn't take her anywhere for the first, month or so. But then after that, my neighbors say, hey, can we come over and bring you guys a gift? And we go, sure. They came over, they sat down, they gave us this gift. They gave some clothes and little stuff. And then they plopped down this Walmart bag. And they're like, hey, here's another gift, but it's not from us, but there's a story with this gift. And I go, okay, well, what's the story? And they said, well, we know you guys had problems in the past with your other little baby, and we know that you've been really wanting to adopt and all this. And so I let my brother-in-law know, and he's a prayerful man. He loves God. He prays, and he's been praying for you. You don't really know him, but he's been praying for you to adopt a child. And she said, but he was in a really bad car accident a little over a month ago. And, when we heard that you guys had adopted, we decided, hey, or not adopted, but got another baby placed with you. We wanted to cheer him up. So we just went over there to his house. He was finally out of the hospital, and he was mending, and he had been in a car accident. I guess, not his fault, but he was on the freeway driving. Something happened up ahead of him, and a car flew in front of him, and he T-boned this car, and it ended up the lady that he hit died. And this is a Christian man who really it took it hard. It was not his fault, but he still took it really hard. He was down about it. And so they came over, and they're like, hey, and they told him, hey, we want to bring you good news. The Carvers have a baby girl placed with them. And he was just like, what? Like, he was shocked. And because it's not an easy process to get placed. And, it was already 2 or 3 years into this process for us. So he looks at him, he's kind of shocked, and he tells his son, he's like, hey, son, go in the truck that's now totaled in his driveway, go behind the seat and get that bag. And they go, well, what's that? He says, oh, I have a gift for them. What do you mean you have a gift for them? We just told you didn't know they had a baby. What kind of gift do you have? He's like, well, you remember the last time I went to your house right before the accident? And they're like, yeah. And he says, well, he's like, I looked over at, I always pray for them. And so he's like, I looked over at their house right across the street, and I just lifted my hands and I prayed, Lord, give them a child. Lord, give them a child. And he says, at that moment, he's like, I can't explain it. It wasn't like an audible voice or anything like that, but God really impressed on me like that I already have. Like God's saying, quote, I'll put that in quotes, I already have. So it's like God communicated to him. He said, I've already given them a child. And so he's like, I've never had this experience before. Got really convicted of it. And he just went inside. He's like, I didn't tell anybody. And he says, a couple days later, I went and I bought them this gift. It was a little Lion King blanket. And this is a man who, he's a man of meager means. He shouldn't be buying gifts for anybody else, but he really felt like he wanted to get us a gift. And then he kept it in his truck because he's like, well, they're going to think I'm crazy if I give them a gift and they don't have a baby there. And so he's like, I'll just hold on to it. And so we're sitting there like, and then the receipt is in the back. And the receipt is dated November 23rd. And we got Mariah on December 4th. So we're like, oh, this is crazy. Like, what is going on here? Is God doing something? Is he saying something? Is he, trying to help us to give us assurance because, of our son that was taken away? And so we're just kind of like taking it all in. And like, it was good for us because we really did believe like that Mariah was going to be our baby. So, and our kid, we were going to adopt her. And so a couple weeks later, on a weekend, his name's Jose. I saw Jose out at my neighbor's house. And so I ran across the street. I'm like, hey, man, I know we haven't really met. Introduced myself. I'm like, thank you so much for the gift. And thank you for that encouragement. Can you come over our house and meet the baby and tell us kind of what happened? Like, I'm just curious about it. I don't know how this
I'm
went
curious.
And so he goes, sure, man. He's a real humble person. I mean, this guy, he's not, he's just super humble, man. He's just awesome friend now. But so he comes over, he tells us the same thing. He's like, he's like, I can't explain it, Jeff. I just, somehow I knew that God had already given you a child. It's like, I didn't hear a voice, something like that. I prayed and I felt like the answer already was there. And I was so convicted that I went to get you a gift. I was like, okay, I mean, that's really all he could say. It's all I could say. And so he's telling me everything. He's like, Jeff, I really feel that no matter what happens, what you hear from the courts, what sort of adversity comes, like Mariah's going to be your baby. She's going to be your child. She is your child. Like God has given her to you. And so he is really convicted of that. And so for us, it was a little semblance of assurance. And we're like, okay, like I can believe this. I can believe this. And I looked at it, I pulled the receipt out of the bag and I go, Jose, this receipt says November 23rd. I was like, is that the day that this all happened, that you prayed and you felt like God gave you an answer? And he was like, no, it was a couple days before. It was 2 days before, because I went over their house on a Saturday, and then Sunday was church, and then Monday I went to Walmart and I bought you guys a gift. I go, I really appreciate it. I go, so you're telling me November 21st is the day that this all happened, like that you had this experience? He goes, yes, November 21st. I go, November 21st is Mariah's birthday. And it was like, I don't know, our jaws just dropped. And I was like, it's like almost too perfect of an experience. And so we kind of just like, okay, I guess God did give the answer. And so we didn't tell anybody. I told my pastor, he's the only person I told that story, until adoption day, when we adopted Mariah in 2017. I think she was about 19 months old. And I sat my family down and I told them that story. I go, look, God gave us this grace and it came true. And we're just grateful for that, because we kind of held it hidden in our hearts. Like Michelle and I, we didn't go and tout this as a prophecy or anything like that, but we were just like, all right, well, let's test it. Let's see. And it ended up being true. And so, I think for us, I know God works all things, right, for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And he wants our good and he wants his glory. And so that's the point of all this. This guy wasn't out here trying to make himself known. He was just giving us a real personal message that really nobody but our neighbors and us knew. And so it was just one of those things that I think, looking back especially, like that's God's grace just telling me, okay, like, don't worry, she's yours.
Yeah, I don't know. I would personally, I maybe would interpret that as just kind of like a personal confirmation from God. It wasn't like you had like a word for somebody, or like you said, you were prophesying things, but it was like a personal God putting his, sending you a little message
Amen. I agree with that 100%. I mean, it just, the timing, like when you tell a story like that, like, oh, that's cool. Like he bought this before, before we got her. So that's kind of crazy, right? Like he bought a gift.
It sounds a little bit creepy.
It does. But he's not the kind of guy, like, again, he doesn't have money to go and just buy gifts. And so it tells me like how strong that message, that conviction, whatever it was for him. He's not going to go and buy gifts. And then he held it. He's like, and he kept the receipt, which is cool. And then to find out that the day that, was her birthday, I go, there's something to this. So, and again, I think it's just all God's grace. And God is good to give you that, especially when you are, and not always, but I think for us, like we needed something like that to sort of just confirm, like God is at work here, like this is going to be good and it's going to have a good outcome and things like that. Because, again, with the history, with the back history of our previous child, that I think he said it felt like we needed that and we got it. So just a cool story. But like adoption and foster care is it's not an easy process. I told you, like, it took years. Literally, we started in 2013 in January. We went through January, February, I think, went through the classes because you got to certify, you got to go through all this process. They ask you a bunch of questions. They get into all your business. They come in your house. They check everything. They make sure it's safe. You got to have all this extra stuff, lots of paperwork and all kinds of stuff. And then you sit and wait. And they ask you, like, okay, what kind of child do you want? And it's the weirdest and strangest questionnaire that you can ever. Are these
liberal social workers?
I think most social workers are liberal, but they I don't know about politics. They don't really bring that into there. But they ask you all kinds of questions, from what kind of race are you comfortable adopting? What sex? What behaviors, what age, all of these demographic questions about, okay, what are you comfortable? And then, and then they interview you, and then they actually come up with a profile, like for your family. And they say, okay, this is this kind of family. We're going to match a child that will match with this family. And so you don't have a choice in which children, like you're not out here shopping for kids, right? So it's just like, okay, we're going to match these two things up where, you feel you can handle certain things. We feel like you'd be best suited for this kind of child. And so they continually try to give us young children or babies. Like they were like, we think a baby would be best because you don't have other kids and, you need to go through that experience. It might be good for you to start off as everyone else does because you don't have that previous experience. Perfectly fine. We'll be fine with a baby. We basically said, 0 to 5 years, we're good with, and boy or girl, we're good with. And we said at first, like, hey, we both kind of preferred a boy to start, but we were open, and so we did have a boy, and then we had a girl, and so Mariah came. But that process it took a while, man. I mean, there were so many times where we got calls like the two that we got, and it fell through. Like, oh, they picked another family, or they went with this, or something happened, and we never were placed. And when we finally were placed, it was in August of 2014. So that's a year and a half, right? I think, a year and a half into the process was our first placement, and then he went back, and then a year and a few months after that is when we got Mariah. So you're talking almost 3 years. And some people get placed in a couple months. I don't. There's just different criteria that they're using for different kinds of people in different families. So, it was great. We're older, which is fine. I think I was 37 when Mariah was born, or almost 38 maybe. Let's see, something like that. Almost 38. So then we have Mariah, and we're like, this process has been really brutal. It was kind of a brutal process because of all the other stuff that goes with it. There's visits. We had to do visits with their biological mother, who has issues. I'll just leave it at that. That was a very difficult process. And then we had to do a bunch of court stuff and a bunch of visits from social workers, not just one social worker, like multiple social workers. Just very disruptive. And it's fine. You go through it because you know that it's worth it, and it's for your good, for your child's good. And so eventually we adopted, I think it was in July of 2017. And so that was the end of that. We go, look, we're not going to recertify. We're not going to try and get more kids. We're just going to enjoy our daughter, and that's good. We're good. We kind of both decided, okay, like, let's take a break. Let's not try and go any further. And so Mariah grew up, 3.5 years old, and we get a call. Now, I didn't mention this before, but Mariah.
A call from a stranger.
No. I didn't mention this before, but Mariah has an older sibling that we've never met, that was adopted by another family, and that we've expressed like openness to meet them. It's not, since he's adopted, it's not her natural family because there's major issues there. So we don't want that connection, but we do want connection with sibling who, is with an adoptive family. So I've always expressed that. Every social worker I talk to, I'm like, hey, if you ever get in touch with them or if they are open to it, let us know. I know that there's privacy issues, but hey, we're open. And so we get a call 3.5 years later, and I get a message, a voicemail. And it's like, hey, this is the county social worker's office, and we want to talk to you about Mariah's sibling. And I go, oh, cool. Like they finally want to connect. That'd be great. So I call back, and I'm like, yeah, we're, I'm Mariah's dad, this and that. Oh, okay. And I go, what's up with her sibling? Like, do they want to meet or what? She's like, no, I'm not talking about her older sibling. She has a new sibling. Her mother had another baby, a boy. Do you want him? And so we're like, what? And I got on speakerphone, and my wife and I are just like speechless. I'm like, can I call you back? Do I have to answer right now? I would just say yes, but I can't make that determination right now. So it was a shock. And so we went through, Michelle and I talked, and we talked and talked and talked. It was not like an immediate thing, mostly because of the issues we went through before with the social workers, with the courts, with the mom, biological mom. There was a lot of baggage there, and there was a lot of trepidation. Like, she didn't want to go through that again. And I honestly didn't either, but for the sake of our daughter, we just said, all right, we made the ultimate decision, of course, to bring him into our family and to just stick it out and tough it out, and whatever happens, happens. And again, by God's grace, we brought Levi home a couple months later. When we brought him into our home, he was 3 months old. He had been with another foster family from basically a month old. He was in the NICU for like his first month of his life because I think he was 3 pounds, 9 ounces or something. He was really tiny. And so the other social worker, or the other people that had him first, ended up being a social worker we knew who was one of Mariah with the agency when we were adopting Mariah. So we knew her. So we knew he was in good hands with that family, and they wanted to adopt him, but ended up, of course, better for him to be with his sister, his biological sister. So we're grateful for them and that family. And so we brought him home. He was 3 months old, and you would think, like, at 3 months, babies are really aware. They're very aware. And the transition was easy. Like, he just woke up the next morning and was like, oh, this is my new family. Like, it's kind of crazy. And I think, again, is God's grace, just like, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. God somehow supernaturally, like, just kept him peaceful in his heart and know that, okay, this is my sister, this is my family. Like, somehow, like, he just knew he was in the right spot. So, and then Levi is the happiest baby ever. I mean, he would wake up smiling. He's a year and like 4 months or 5 months. No, almost, a year and 5 months almost. he's still the happiest kid. He loves life. He wakes up in the morning, he's just happy to be alive. And his sister and him are two peas in a pod. They are so connected. So we now get the blessing of them, of watching them grow up together and all this stuff. And, you know, the process with Levi was so easy. God just made it so easy for us. A lot of the red tape just had been eliminated over the last 3 years. Some of the classes and things we didn't have to take that were just sort of redundant. And then the visits were not as extreme. So we only had a few visits with the biological mom. They expedited his case. So instead of 9 months, it took basically 12, or instead of 19 months like it did with Mariah, it took 12 months. And 4 of those months were because the course were closed for COVID issues. So it would have been way earlier. And so, yeah, we adopted him really quick. And now he's a Carver. And so it's just, again, it's God's grace. And I get a lot of questions about adoption, about foster, and about, you know, what the process is like. And I always tell people, look, it's not easy. Like, don't go into it for yourself. You know what I mean? You don't go into it thinking, oh, I just want to have my family and I'm going to create this family, because that's not how it works. Mm-hmm. You need to go into it really unselfishly and thinking about that little kid, that little baby, because they're the ones that have the most loss. They're losing their biological family. They lose, and that's an identity thing, right? They lose, especially if they're older. And our kids were babies, so it was really great. They didn't really have any trauma or anything, which is a blessing. But, you know, these foster kids, they have a lot of loss. They can lose their extended family. They lose, they're moved around quite a bit. They get transferred over, and a lot of foster families they're not good families either. Maybe not as bad as their original family, but still. So these kids have a lot of issues. And so you don't go into it thinking, hey, I'm just going to create myself a little family. You go into it and say, this child needs love, and they need an environment of stability, and they need that structure, and they really, 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 they need the gospel. And so, my son, the family that had him, they're atheists, they're socialist atheists, it's like, and we didn't know that. We didn't know where he was, but I mean, you don't know where these kids are coming from. And so if you're a believer, like you want to give them the truth. You want to give them the gospel. You want to raise them up right. And I think by God's grace, we have been able to bring him into our home and know that he and my daughter are getting from us as best we can the truth, true love, and just that raising up as God would want them to be raised, again, to the best of our ability and by God's Holy Spirit, His grace, His power, because we're flawed as well. But, it's not a rescue mission. That's the other thing. Like people say, oh, I really admire you for what you did. And it's like, no, like God, God has used my children to shape me at this point, more than He's used me to shape my children. Like my wife and I have been changed by this whole process. Like we I think, and I really do believe, like we understand the gospel more. We have not theologically, but practically and internally, we understand like a little bit more. I'm not saying that we get it more, we're better than anyone else, like because we have kids, but I'm just saying it's a grace that, like, look, it's different. Like there's some, and I wouldn't have understood this, but especially through adoption. I think especially through adoption, not that adoption is better than having your natural kids, because you're going to love your kids no matter what. But this process of adoption really has given us a deeper understanding of God's grace and the gospel, like as what that means. and how God feels about us and how he looks at us. Because I look at my kids as my kids. There's no distinction that they are adopted or they're different or they're not blood or anything like that. It's just, no, that's my son, that's my daughter, and there's no breaking of that bond. You know what I'm saying? I'll let you talk because you haven't talked in a while.
Well, that's okay. I think we'll wrap it up there. It's really encouraging to hear. I'm very blessed to know, and with a good degree of certainty that they're going to grow up in a blessed home, in a structured home, in a Christian home, with God's grace and God's love in their life, which is much more than you or I had.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, to see God working through all this is a great encouragement. You're a blessing. Appreciate you. Have a lot of respect for you. Maybe I'll have you on in the future and we can get an update on
Sure.
them in the future.
Yeah.
And so thank you.
Yeah, man.
And we'll be praying for you and Michelle and Mariah and Levi. Everybody, please pray for his family. And remember that if we keep speaking the big truth loud enough and long enough, some people just might start to believe it.
Amen. Amen.
You're listening to the Here Be Dragons podcast.